There was one thought I couldn't ignore. My wife seemed unusually close to my son's best friend. It started a few years ago, around the time we were planning another family vacation. Our son had just come home from school. It was a trip we'd been excited about for a while. Like always, my wife took the lead on organizing everything. She loved planning, and I loved seeing her light up as she mapped it all out. We've always been pretty social folks. We hang out with a close-knit group of friends, mostly couples we both know well. My wife has her own routine too. She goes out to dinners with her girlfriends once or twice a week. Sometimes it's at a restaurant, sometimes it's someone's house. Her calendar's usually packed, and she has a hard time saying no to invites. That's why this one moment stuck with me. I was walking by the kitchen when I heard her on the phone, not coordinating plans like usual, but full-on trying to convince someone to come on the trip. I couldn't make out everything she said. My hearing's not what it used to be, but it sounded like she was pitching a vacation to a kid. It'll be just like last time, boat rides, the beach, snorkeling, that sort of thing. And then she noticed me. She jumped like I'd startled her, clutching her chest like I'd scared the life out of her. Then she tried to play it off like nothing happened. I raised an eyebrow, just trying to figure out what that was all about. She ducked into the pantry for a second, came back out like she was trying to gather herself, and asked what I wanted for dinner, which, funny enough, she had already asked me earlier that day. I gave her the same answer and walked into the living room to join the kids, trying to push the weirdness out of my head while we watched TV. A little while later, we were all gathered at the dining table, my wife, the kids, and me, eating dinner and chatting about school, friends, and just everyday stuff. Somewhere in the middle of it, my wife casually mentioned that my son's friend, let's call him Axel, had texted her saying he was interested in coming along on our upcoming vacation. That got my son's attention right away. He looked surprised and said he hadn't even told Axel about the trip yet, since he was planning to bring his girlfriend instead. But he also mentioned that Axel had just messaged him a few minutes earlier, saying something about wanting to tag along too. My son said he'd been meaning to check with us before responding, but was glad Mom had brought it up first. Now, my son had already made it clear that his girlfriend was coming along, so having Axel there as well felt like a weird mix, especially since he'd probably be spending most of his time with her. What really stuck out to me, though, was this gut feeling that my wife hadn't been completely honest about the whole situation. I couldn't shake the thought that Axel was actually the person she'd been on the phone with earlier, talking in that overly cheerful, coaxing tone, and now she was trying to play it off like Axel had come up with the idea on his own. I mean, Axel's always been a decent kid. He and my son hit it off when they were around 14, after meeting at summer camp. They became tight after that, inseparable, really. Both his parents are African American and work hard in delivery jobs. Good folks from a modest neighborhood in the inner city. Out of respect, I won't go into too much detail about them. Axel and my son ended up going to different high schools, but Axel's parents went out of their way to sign him up for all sorts of after-school programs, ones my son was involved in too. They also played a lot of basketball together, and Axel came over all the time to hang out and play video games. I met Axel's mom a couple of times, usually when she dropped him off or picked him up from practice. My wife often offered to give him rides, and she always seemed to have a soft spot for him. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Axel was respectful, smart, and honestly had more emotional maturity than most kids his age, even more than my son sometimes. He was easy to talk to, could carry on conversations with adults without missing a beat. So, for a long while, I didn't give any of this a second thought. It even made sense to me at the time that my wife might have gone out of her way to reconnect with him. She's always been passionate about helping underprivileged youth, mentoring minority students, getting involved in progressive causes, and volunteering whenever she could. I figured this was just another example of her heart leading the way. 3 days before our vacation, she and our 18-year-old daughter went out shopping to get things for the trip. It was one of those long, drawn-out shopping trips, and they came back with stuff not just for us and the kids, but also a few small gifts for Axel. Honestly, if I had known about it beforehand, I wouldn't have thought it was strange. She used to buy him gifts when he was younger too. The next morning, my son's girlfriend arrived. Later that evening, Axel showed up as well. That night turned out to be a blast. We all went out for dinner. My wife sat next to me, and Axel sat by our daughter. Everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves. But something felt off. I noticed my wife sneaking glances at Axel more than once while we were out. Even when I was talking directly to her, she seemed unusually upbeat, like she was glowing. I brushed it off at the time. Everyone was happy, and that made me happy, too. No reason to start doubting things, right? When we got back to the house later that night, I went to bed. My wife stayed up with the kids. I think she finally came to bed around 3 in the morning, though I can't say for sure. The next day, while we were packing and checking off our list before heading out, I realized something: my credit card was missing. I looked everywhere for it, retraced my steps, but couldn't find it. Since my wife had used it last, I decided to check her bags, thinking maybe she forgot to hand it back. That's when I stumbled on something that caught me completely off guard. Tucked away in her luggage was one of those barely there, open-back, crotchless bikinis. It was revealing, to say the least. Honestly, I thought it was wildly inappropriate for a woman her age, especially a mother. Still, part of me figured maybe it was meant as a surprise for me during the trip. So I let it go. The next day, we boarded a business-class flight and headed to our destination, a luxury resort on the southwestern coast of Guadeloupe. The place was gorgeous. Classic Caribbean beauty, white sands, clear turquoise waters. Pure paradise. It was actually on the island of Martinique, not far from the southern shore. Hands down, one of the nicest places I've ever been. That first day, I spent most of my time stretched out on the beach with a copy of the Wall Street Journal, reading up on market trends and investment tips. The rest of the family went off scuba diving. Later that night, my wife, our son, his girlfriend, and Axel decided to hit a disco bar. I wasn't feeling up to it, so I took our daughter out to dinner instead. The four of them came back about 3 hours after we did. My wife seemed a little buzzed when she walked in. Not falling down drunk or anything, but definitely tipsy. It was subtle, but I could tell. That night, she woke me up wanting to be intimate, and honestly, it was one of the most passionate moments we'd had in a long time. It caught me off guard, but I figured something about her night out had really stirred her up. The next day, I spent most of my time just relaxing by the beach with her. That evening, she told me she was heading out to dinner with our daughter, our son, his girlfriend, and Axel. Sounded normal enough at the time. But around 10 o'clock the next morning, my son came back with his girlfriend and his sister. Only my wife and Axel weren't with them. I asked where she was, and they told me she and Axel had gone on some local wildlife tour together. Just the two of them. That didn't sit right with me. Something about it felt off. Later that same night, sometime around 1 in the morning, I woke up again and noticed she wasn't in bed beside me. I figured I'd step out to enjoy the ocean breeze while I waited for her to return. But as soon as I opened the door into the living room, I caught a sudden movement by the couch, like someone had just shifted positions real fast. The TV was still on, and there was my wife, pretending to be lying casually on one of the couches. Axel was on another, right across from her. She was wearing a very revealing wrap skirt, one that barely covered anything, and I recognized the color right away. It was the same open-back, bow-tied, crotchless bikini I'd seen in her luggage earlier. They were sitting apart, technically, but the whole scene reeked of discomfort. They looked like two kids caught red-handed, awkwardly trying to act normal. The air felt thick, despite the open windows, and there was this lingering smell, something I could only describe as the sin of sex. My hearing might be fading, but my other senses were working overtime at that moment. I could just feel that something intimate had gone on between them. If I had opened that door just a few seconds earlier or a little slower, I swear I might have caught them in the act. I stood there, stunned. Neither of them said a word. Axel was shirtless, wearing only shorts, not unusual with us staying so close to the beach, but I could tell he was flustered and trying to adjust himself under the blanket. It was clear they had scrambled to make it look like they were just watching TV. I turned around and headed back to our room. A minute later, she followed me, acting like nothing had happened. She was trying hard to play it cool, talking like everything was totally normal, as if I hadn't just walked in on something deeply suspicious. I didn't say a word. I was stunned. I just laid there, feeling this mix of shame, sadness, and betrayal wash over me. It was like the walls were closing in. My hearing loss had already made me feel like I was fading into the background of my own life, and now this? It was like I didn't even exist to her anymore. I felt small, invisible, even to my own family. I barely slept that night. By morning, I knew I didn't have anything solid, just this pile of little moments that added up to a sick feeling in my gut. From the phone call I overheard weeks ago to what I walked in on that night, it all pointed to something more going on. I couldn't keep it inside any longer. I had to say something. So I asked her to come into the room and sat her down. I told her I'd seen her getting too close to Axel and asked her straight up, how long had this been going on? Her response? Nothing like what I expected. She blew up. Denied everything. Got defensive real fast. She was angry that I even dared to ask the question, called me names, told me I was paranoid, deaf, and losing my mind. She was relentless, flipped it around, and made me feel like the bad guy for even bringing it up. And it worked. I had no proof, just a gut feeling, and she used that against me. Said I wasn't just losing my hearing, I was losing touch with reality. She got loud enough I worried the kids might hear. That was the last thing I wanted, our kids thinking I was jealous of this young man they'd known for years, someone they saw as practically part of the family. In the end, I folded. I backed off. I ended up being the one apologizing. I regretted it right after. I should have waited, should have taken time to think before confronting her. I let emotion override reason, which isn't like me. I usually keep a cool head. But I was tired of second-guessing what I knew deep down was real. The rest of the trip was miserable. She treated me like I was a burden, barely spoke to me, acted cold and distant, as if I'd wronged her. It hurt. I felt like I'd lost a piece of her respect. But no matter how much I doubted myself, I couldn't shake what I felt. I was certain she was gaslighting me, and I was just one moment too late from catching them that night on the couch. And now, here's the update. Just 2 days ago, I confronted her again. I told her flat out that I still believed she had something going on with Axel. Just like before, she denied it. No surprise there. But ever since, she's been giving me the cold shoulder. Hasn't said much of anything to me. Even the kids have picked up on the tension, though we've kept it under wraps so far. One thing that's changed? She stopped spending time alone with Axel. Now she only does activities when we're all together. It's like she's trying to clean things up or make it seem like nothing ever happened. This vacation was supposed to be a time for the 5 of us to reconnect, to enjoy each other like we always had. Past trips were full of fun, fishing, picnics, laughter. But this one? It's like a shadow hung over everything. And sure, Axel had come on vacations with us before. He even came when he was 19. But this time, something just felt different. She pushed so hard to have him with us. I still don't know why. Thinking back, I spent most of that vacation sticking close to my wife during the day. But I've never been much of a night person. I like my sleep. She, on the other hand, thrives at night. So I'd usually turn in early while she stayed up. If anything happened between her and Axel, it probably happened while I was out cold. And honestly, I can't shake the feeling that this wasn't something new. I suspect it had been going on for a while. Maybe she got bolder this time around because she hadn't seen Axel as much lately with him being tied up with college. Looking back, I started questioning all those late-night dinners she always had with her married friends. They happened like clockwork, once or twice a week. But now that I think about it, those dinners always seemed to ramp up when Axel was home on break. Our connection had always felt solid. But lately, I'd noticed a shift. As we've gotten older, her sex drive seemed to climb while mine slowed down. We still shared moments of intimacy, about once a week. If it were up to her, it probably would have been more often. And I can't help but wonder, did that gap push her to look elsewhere? Now, with just 2 days left of vacation, it felt like everyone was enjoying themselves, except her and me. The tension between us had gotten thick, and I didn't want it to linger another day. I certainly didn't want to carry it back home with us. I wanted to fix things, or at least try. So I pulled her aside and suggested we step out for dinner, just the 2 of us, at a quiet little restaurant away from the noise. She agreed. That evening, while the kids were off doing their own thing, I threw on a floral shirt and she slipped into a sundress. The restaurant was only a few hundred yards from the resort, so we walked there together. We had a table reserved facing the ocean. The view was stunning, waves rolling and under the moonlight. We sat at a small table for 2, and for a while, I just kept quiet. I wanted her to be the one to start talking. Last time I confronted her, I rushed into it. This time, I figured I'd ease in gently, make her feel comfortable, maybe even apologize for jumping the gun before, and let her do most of the talking. My plan was to listen carefully. If she slipped, I'd catch it. The truth is, I trusted her completely for over 2 decades. I gave her everything. But now, I was staring across the table at someone who had betrayed that trust. Someone who got involved, physically or emotionally, with a man younger than our son. And then had the nerve to twist it around, making me feel guilty for even asking the question. I'd built this life for our family, worked hard for the house, the vacations, the comfort. Even the dress she was wearing? I paid for it. And still, she treated me like a fool, like I was too dumb to see what was happening. I'll admit, I let work consume me for years. And with my hearing loss creeping in, I guess I stopped noticing the little things. I trusted her too much. Gave her too much freedom without really paying attention. And now, The idea that she might have had an affair with our son's best friend, no less, made me feel sick. That wasn't just betrayal. That was personal. After a long stretch of silence, she finally spoke up. She apologized for not spending as much time with me on the trip, said things hadn't felt the same lately. She mentioned that maybe my suspicions came from how close she and Axel had always been. Then she looked straight into my eyes and said, "I never slept with him." I didn't respond. I just gave her a quiet nod. She kept talking, saying she understood how distant I'd been lately, that my hearing loss made things harder, and she'd just been trying to reconnect with me. She apologized for the things she said during our argument, said her anger got the best of her. Then she reassured me, told me she was loyal, committed to us, and didn't want this tension between us anymore. At first, it felt promising. I thought maybe, just maybe, we were going to get back on track. So I told her I hadn't been myself lately either. I said I wanted us to grow closer, enjoy the rest of the trip, and reconnect. I didn't mention Axel. I avoided the subject completely. We had a beautiful, romantic dinner. Walked back to the resort holding hands like everything was fine. For the rest of the trip, she made more of an effort to spend time with me. But something about it felt staged. Like she was putting on a show. Maybe I was just overthinking it, now that the blinders were off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the woman I thought I knew wasn't the same anymore. After that dinner, the kids stopped sensing any tension. Things appeared normal again. But deep inside, I couldn't let go of the nagging doubt. Something still didn't add up. That's when I remembered something I'd done months ago, almost on a whim. I had installed security cameras throughout our home, just for peace of mind. They covered the front porch, backyard, both sides of the house, the living room, the home theater, and the game room. They stored footage for 30 days. Suddenly, I had hope. Maybe, just maybe, those cameras had caught something. I didn't need to rely on gut feelings anymore. I could go home, check the footage, and finally find proof. Or not. Either way, I had to know. So I kept pretending everything was fine. I acted like nothing had ever happened. From her perspective, I was back to normal. She probably thought she'd dodged a bullet, that I dropped it. She even went out of her way to act like the perfect wife and mom, all smiles and warmth. But the more she played that role, the more disgusted I felt. Because deep down, I was convinced she was only pretending, and that she was perfectly comfortable lying to me. The more I thought about it, the more it felt like this kind of thing might have been going on the whole time we were together. I've always lived by a code, whether in my personal life or in business, where honesty and loyalty come first. So when someone lies to me, especially someone I love, it cuts deep. I can't stand feeling deceived. When we got back from our trip, I was actually kind of excited. A part of me hoped I'd find something on the security cameras, but I kept my expectations low. My wife knew those cameras were there. She was the one who pushed me to install them after she saw a setup like that at her friend's place. I didn't think she'd be foolish enough to do anything shady right in their line of sight. Still, a small part of me hoped maybe she'd gotten sloppy this time. That paranoia ate at me. Since she probably suspected I was onto her, I had this fear she'd race home ahead of me and try to wipe the footage before I had a chance to look through it. She's not exactly a tech wizard, so I figured deleting the recordings would be out of her league. But even so, I worried she might find a way to mess with the memory, maybe damage the system or erase just enough to cover her tracks. After we landed, I told her I wasn't feeling well. Played it up real good, acted like I was coming down with something. I asked her to swing by the pharmacy to grab a prescription for me. She usually handles that stuff anyway. I told her I'd forgotten my meds at the resort, even though I didn't actually need them. Then I said the kids and I would take a different cab home, so I could get some rest, and that Axel would head to his parents' place. As soon as I stepped inside the house, I went straight to the system and started downloading footage from 2 days prior, the same days Axel had been visiting. I copied everything onto a portable hard drive. The process took a little while, but I got it all before my wife made it back home. Once she was back, I watched her closely. I wanted to see if she checked the camera system, fiddled with the storage, or tried anything sneaky, but she acted like the cameras weren't even there. Like they didn't exist. We spent the whole evening unpacking. By the time we were done, it was nearly midnight. All I could think about was getting everyone to bed so I could finally watch the footage. When the house was quiet and everyone had gone to sleep, I hooked up the hard drive to my laptop and started combing through the videos. I jumped ahead to the time frame when Axel had arrived. That night, he stayed in the guest room, which you get to through the hallway off the game room. As I fast-forwarded through the recording, I caught sight of my wife walking into the frame on the game room camera. I hit play, slowed it down to normal speed. The timestamp said it was 12:53 in the morning. She met Axel in the hallway, right there where the camera could see. He pulled her in and kissed her. Not just a peck, they were going at it for a moment. Then she gave him a playful little shove and turned to walk away. As she left, he smacked her on the behind, and she giggled like a teenager as she headed toward the main area of the house. You didn't need to be a genius or even have sight to see what was going on. They were clearly having an affair. That was it. That was all the confirmation I needed. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might just give out on me. Oddly enough, I wasn't angry. I felt this strange sense of relief. Finally, I had what I needed to confront her. Just as I was about to shut my laptop, she popped up on the footage again. It was around 1:15 in the morning. This time, she walked straight down the hall to the guest room, Axel's room. She didn't come out again until 2:47 a.m. Now, the guest room was where my son's girlfriend had been staying, but not that night. Axel was the only one using it. So it was obvious what had happened. She'd spent over an hour and a half in that room with him, and then walked right into our bedroom, our bed, where I was sound asleep. With that kind of proof, I didn't say a word to her the next morning. Instead, I got on the phone with my lawyer. He pointed me toward a good divorce attorney, and I booked an appointment that same day. After talking through everything, I got a clearer picture of just how financially brutal this divorce could get. Still, no amount of money was worth staying in a marriage built on lies and betrayal. There was no way I could keep pretending with someone who looked me in the eye and lied, who had the nerve to spin things around and accuse me of being judgmental, while she was messing around with a young guy she was supposed to be mentoring. I knew I didn't want to drag the kids into it, not with all the ugly details. I didn't want to poison their image of their mom. But one thing was clear, I wanted Axel out of our lives completely. Maybe he didn't start it, maybe he was just caught up in it. But either way, I wasn't going to let him stick around as a reminder of what she did. Whether I'd ever tell the kids the whole truth, I wasn't sure. But I did plan to use this footage to my advantage when dealing with my wife. Later that evening, once the kids were out of the house, I edited the video. I trimmed it down to just the key parts, the kiss in the hallway, and her walking into the guest room at 1:15 and not coming out until nearly 3. I called her in and played it on my laptop. It only took a few seconds for her to realize what she was looking at. She buried her face in her hands and wouldn't even glance at the screen. I started asking her questions, simple stuff, like when it started between them, but she didn't say a word. Just sat there, sobbing. She knew there was no excuse. No way to explain it away. That was my moment. I took it as my chance to let her feel just a bit of what I'd gone through on that trip, carrying the weight of suspicion, the gnawing sense of betrayal, while trying to keep it all together. I started calling her every name that came to mind, nothing too creative, just raw anger talking. But the only time she really reacted was when I brought up the idea of showing the video to our kids. That hit her like a truck. She instantly stopped crying, looked me dead in the eye, then dropped to her knees and begged. Said she'd do anything, whatever it took, to keep that video away from the children. So I laid out my terms. She'd accept whatever alimony I decided to offer, if any, and we'd move forward with the divorce on my conditions. In return, I agreed to play along and tell everyone that the split was simply due to irreconcilable differences. The next day, we sat down with the kids, me, her, and all 3 of them. We broke the news as gently as we could. Naturally, they had tons of questions. They were confused, upset, and tried to talk us out of it, hoping maybe we could work things out. But my wife stuck to the story, just like we agreed. She told them we'd both been unhappy for a while, that separating was the best choice. It was a tough night. She worked hard to keep her emotions in check, trying to make it seem like she was the one driving the decision. But it was obvious to everyone that I was the one ending things. No matter how much we tried to hide it, her pain leaked through the cracks. It was heartbreaking for the whole family. I tried to keep a strong face, but when I was alone later in the bedroom, I broke down. The tears just came. Another marriage, torn apart for the same damn reason. Makes me wonder sometimes, why do I even bother getting married? Anyway, after we told the kids, things at home got heavy. My youngest, she's 16 now, took it the hardest. She couldn't wrap her head around why we couldn't just fix it. The very next day, my oldest daughter came into the bedroom, our old room that I used to share with my wife. Now, she sleeps in the guest room. My daughter told me she tried knocking on her mom's door but hadn't gotten a single response. She was confused and hurting, trying to figure out how things went from vacation smiles to divorce in just a few days. She sat on the edge of the bed, tears in her eyes, gently pushing me to tell her the real reason. It almost made me slip. She kept saying we were shutting them out, and honestly, I hadn't thought of it that way. But I told her that when the dust settled, her mother would explain everything. I gave her the safest version of the truth I could manage, that her mom and I had once shared a wonderful marriage, and I was grateful for the family we built together. But sometimes, people fall out of love. That's all I said. Nothing more. She was sharp, though. I could tell she picked up on the fact that I wasn't being completely honest. When she left the room, I had a feeling she was already suspecting infidelity but didn't want to force the issue. Maybe she was scared of what she'd uncover. She's very close with her mom, so I figured it wouldn't be long before she found out on her own. The day after that, I had a visit with my otolaryngologist, got fitted with a hearing aid that made a huge difference. Funny how, in the middle of emotional chaos, you can still appreciate something small like being able to hear better. Back at home, my wife barely came out of her room. She stayed holed up for a couple of days. We usually had dinner as a family, but that week was different. The kids grabbed their plates and took them to their rooms. My wife never showed up at all. I ended up sitting alone at the table. My oldest daughter, she's a fantastic cook. Whenever she comes back from college, she usually takes over kitchen duty. She's smart, dependable, just a good kid all around. I'm so proud of her. We used to be your typical traditional American family. Dinner at the table, hugs, and I love you, before bed, church on Sundays, the whole thing. Sitting there by myself, looking at the empty chairs, it hit me how much had changed. I had poured years into building this family. And my wife, because of one stupid affair, tore it apart. As I sat there alone, part of me was angry, sure. But I also started second-guessing myself. Was I doing the right thing? I mean, up until the day I found out, I wasn't unhappy in the marriage. It's not like she was neglecting me. I've read about men whose wives cheat and completely cut them off emotionally or physically, but that wasn't my experience. My wife had always been affectionate. She treated me like I mattered. Even before we had kids, I always felt like her number one. So yeah, that betrayal stung even more. I couldn't help but wonder, was she chasing something I couldn't give her? Was Axel just convenient, always around? If it had been some random guy outside our circle, maybe, just maybe, it would have been easier to swallow. But Axel? My son's best friend? A guy who practically lived with us at one point? That just made it worse. The next day, my son's girlfriend left, and I finally had a chance to sit down with him. We didn't talk too deep, but he asked how I was holding up. The way he phrased things, I could tell he'd been talking with his sister. He was worried, and I appreciated that. About a day later, my wife finally stepped out of her isolation. She looked awful, eyes red and swollen, hair all tangled like she hadn't touched a brush in days. I doubt she'd showered. That night, we both sat down for dinner, just the two of us, but we didn't speak. She sat at one end of the table. I sat at the other, like strangers sharing a meal in silence. The strange thing was, I felt like I should have been the one falling apart, crying, eyes swollen, drowning in pain. But instead, it was my wife who looked broken, while I sat there quietly carrying the weight of her secret, unable to tell our kids the real reason their parents were splitting up. What hurt even more was how concerned the kids seemed for her. She looked so devastated that their sympathy naturally went to her. And to be fair, she's always been the warm, bubbly type, makes everyone feel welcome, always nurturing, the life of any gathering. Seeing her like this was a drastic shift from the woman they were used to. Now don't get me wrong, I was hurting too. Badly. But I'd gotten pretty good at hiding it, at putting on a brave face and acting like everything was fine. The next day, out of the blue, she asked if we could go to one of our favorite restaurants and talk. Honestly, I didn't feel like it. I was still raw, still wounded from everything that had happened. But with the kids walking on eggshells around us and the house feeling colder by the day, I figured it might help break the tension. If we were going to go through with this divorce, I at least wanted to keep it civil. We drove together in silence, same car, different worlds. Not much was said until we got to the restaurant. Once we sat down, she dove right in. She apologized. She told me she was sorry for hurting me, for breaking my trust, for everything. She said she'd been so ashamed and embarrassed that she couldn't bring herself to step out of our room. Claimed she'd acted selfishly, just reacting on impulse without thinking about how it might hurt the people who loved her. She looked me in the eyes and said she still loved me, deeply, and wanted to spend the rest of her life with me. But she also admitted that it wasn't until she got caught that she truly understood just how much damage she had done. I sat there quietly, letting her speak. When she finished, I told her the truth. It felt like her remorse was more about getting caught than the actual betrayal. And I told her we owed our kids the truth. Her face dropped instantly. She lowered her head and cradled it in her hands like she was in physical pain. When she finally looked back up, her eyes were full of tears and she was fanning herself, breathing like she was on the verge of a panic attack. I just sat there, calm and quiet. I didn't flinch. She was silent for a while. Then she said she knew. Eventually she'd have to tell the kids, but she needed time. She asked if there was any way we could fix things between us. That's when she floated the idea. What if we stayed married, but I was free to see other women, and she'd stay faithful? She begged me not to force her to tell the truth, not yet, and asked if we could just keep everything between the two of us. I told her no. I said the kids deserved honesty. Then I asked her straight up, how long had the affair been going on? She looked me in the eye and said it had been going on for 6 years. 6 years. That meant Axel was still in high school when it started. I asked her to walk me through it, to give me the details. She said the first time it happened was an accident. Our youngest daughter had a basketball game, and she'd gone to watch with her son. Axel had tagged along with him. The game was supposed to start around 5 p.m., but there was a delay. Our daughter was warming up with her team while our son was either watching or glued to his phone. She couldn't quite remember. Axel ended up sitting between her and our boy. They struck up a conversation, and at some point, she mentioned needing some air. Axel walked out with her. Somehow, they ended up in the back of her minivan in the school parking lot. And that's where it started, a kiss, and then more. She admitted feeling disgusted with herself afterward. They both swore it would never happen again and agreed to keep it a secret. But that one moment turned into a pattern. Over the years, they kept finding ways to be alone. They continued meeting in secret, sneaking around, and crossing lines. She claimed she hadn't seen him for 6 months before our trip, and that it hadn't been on her mind until he showed up. But I didn't buy it. I told her Axel didn't just invite himself on that vacation. She had talked him into coming. She hesitated, then admitted I was right. She had pushed for it. She wanted one more chance to be with him, wanted the trip to make it easier to get close again. She confessed that the day before the trip, they were already fooling around, caught by our home security cameras. And yes, they were intimate again during the vacation, the very time I caught them. She said she had feelings for him, couldn't help but be physically drawn to him. But she still claimed she loved me, tried to paint what she had with Axel as purely physical, like that was supposed to make it easier to accept. She told me that as she's gotten older, her desire for intimacy had grown. Meanwhile, she felt like I'd grown colder in that area, like I didn't want it as often. She said she was left feeling empty, frustrated, and unfulfilled. She turned to Axel to fill that void. And somewhere along the way, it became her new normal, like cheating had just become a part of her life. She also shared that she'd been seeing a psychotherapist and had been prescribed antidepressants, stuff for anxiety, depression, or obsessive thoughts. Apparently, they sometimes help manage compulsive sexual behavior too. She told me she'd stopped taking the meds because of side effects she didn't feel comfortable with. Said therapy helped a bit, and using certain adult toys gave her some temporary relief. But even with all that, the affair with Axel never stopped. According to her, he was the only man she'd ever cheated with. She insisted those tools and sessions helped her manage the urges, but clearly not enough to end it. As she laid all this out, stuff she'd never told me before, I felt a wave of confusion and guilt. Part of me wondered if I'd known all this earlier, maybe I would have looked into some kind of male enhancement pills, something to match her needs. When I asked her why she never said anything, she claimed she had, just not in detail. She said she'd dropped hints over the years, but felt like I had already pulled away from her. She told me I only showed interest once or twice a week, while she was craving closeness every single day. She brought up the times I had turned her down and how she'd always been the one trying to initiate. But she also made it clear she wasn't blaming me, just owning up to the fact that her desires were different, more intense, and maybe outside the norm. She wanted to fix herself, she said, because she saw how much I was already dealing with. After hearing all that, my anger began to cool down a little. I saw a different side of things. My wife had been dealing with something that was eating at her, some kind of compulsion or obsession she didn't fully understand. And in a strange way, I'd known it was there all along. I just didn't think it was serious. She hadn't always been that way, so I figured it was just a phase. I even knew about the toys, but never gave it much thought. As long as I was getting what I needed, I figured everything was fine. Looking back, That was selfish of me. I should have paid more attention to what she was trying to say. It started to feel like maybe she was battling something deeper, maybe a condition of some kind, and I hadn't taken the time to understand. And while it helped to finally hear her side, it didn't change the fact that she'd crossed a line. She broke our vows. And deep down, I still believed there needed to be consequences for that. But even so, I started to question whether divorce was really the right answer. I needed to talk it out with someone neutral, so I booked a session with my therapist. He listened, then told me that if I was even considering staying with her, one thing had to happen. She had to cut ties with Axel completely. No contact. No closure meetups. Just done. I asked if he thought we should tell the kids, and he said he couldn't speak to the emotional state of my wife or the children. But he did warn me that Axel might eventually tell them himself. So if I wanted to maintain control of the story, it was better that it came from us. He didn't push one way or the other, but said that if I decided not to tell them right away, I needed to make sure my wife told Axel the affair was out in the open, and that he was never to contact her or anyone in our family again. He also suggested we give it a 2 or 3 month trial period, kind of a probation, to see if staying together still felt right. He recommended we both get individual counseling. And if I was open to it, he thought couples therapy could help give her a space to open up while someone impartial listened in. After that session, I was still unsure about a lot of things. But the more I thought about my kids, our long history, and the good years we did have together, I figured giving it a couple months wouldn't hurt. At least I'd know for sure. That night, I sat down with her and told her what needed to happen. First and foremost, she had to cut Axel out of her life completely. No calls, no texts, no bumping into him by accident. If she broke that rule, the divorce would move forward, no more talk. I also told her we were going to tell our son and oldest daughter. And after that, they'd have to cut ties with Axel too. I wasn't going to let him keep hanging around, not after what he did to our family. She agreed. She said she knew what she did was wrong, and she was willing to do whatever it took to save our marriage. She was scared of how our kids would look at her after this, but agreed that she wouldn't go into the graphic details. She said she'd take whatever consequences came with the truth. Things started to feel a little less tense around the house after that. The kids weren't sure if the divorce was still happening, but they didn't ask directly. We were slowly getting back to some kind of normal. We even started eating dinner together again. My wife and I were still in separate rooms, but the atmosphere in the house had softened. Later that week, we decided it was time to talk to the older 2 kids. After dinner, we sent our youngest to her room, then sat our son and daughter down at the dining table. I started by telling them that their mother was the reason I had originally wanted a divorce. But now, we were trying to work through things. And in order for that to happen, their mother needed to come clean. Then it was her turn to speak. It took her a long moment to find her voice, and when she finally did, tears were already streaming down her cheeks. The kids just stared at her, confused and anxious. I couldn't tell if what we were seeing was raw emotion or just a performance meant to stir up sympathy. Either way, it was painful to watch. She started off saying how disappointed she was in herself, how ashamed she felt for making such a terrible mistake by getting involved with Axel. The room went dead silent. I looked over at my kids to see how they were taking it. My wife kept her head down the entire time, never once meeting our eyes. The second the truth came out, my daughter's mouth dropped open, and my son lost it. He jumped up from the table, cursing loud enough to rattle the walls, then stormed off to his room and slammed the door so hard the whole house shook. I just sat there, still at the dining table. My daughter was 2 seats down from me, her face frozen in shock. After a minute, she whispered, "I knew it. I knew it," as if the puzzle pieces had finally clicked together. She walked over and wrapped her arms around me. I didn't move, didn't hug her back, but she held on tight anyway. She was crying too. I could feel her shoulders shaking. My wife was now sobbing uncontrollably. I glanced over and could see she was completely broken down. And despite everything, I felt a strange pang of concern for her. I'd never seen her like that before, completely shattered. Eventually, she stood up and left the room without saying a word. She went straight to the guest bedroom and shut the door behind her. My daughter asked me if I was all right. I told her I was. I said I'd had time to sit with the truth, to process it, even though I hadn't forgiven her mom. I tried to explain that I pushed for this talk because I didn't want to keep them in the dark any longer. They deserved honesty, not more silence and lies. That night, I went to bed with a clear conscience. For the first time in a long time, I felt like tomorrow might actually be a fresh start, not perfect, but at least honest. The next morning, My daughter made breakfast for me. My wife stayed locked in her room. My son had already left the house. My daughter said he was still furious and planned on moving out for a while because he couldn't stand to be around his mother. Most of that morning, I spent talking with my daughters, mainly my oldest, who tried her best to distract me from the mess and bring a little light back into the day. By the afternoon, my wife still hadn't shown herself. My daughter was getting nervous because they had errands to run and were running late. She knocked on her mom's door for a solid 10 minutes, but got nothing, no response, not even a sound. As the evening rolled around, I started to feel uneasy too. Something wasn't right. At first, I thought maybe she was just hiding, too ashamed to face the kids again. But as time ticked by, that explanation started to feel thinner and thinner. Dinner came and went. My wife didn't show up. My son didn't come home either. I gave him a call. He said he was staying at a friend's house. So it was just me and my girls at the dinner table again. The next morning, there was still no sign of my wife. No footsteps. No movement. No voice. That sinking feeling in my gut deepened. I looked at my daughter and told her we needed to check on her. The door was locked from the inside. I got a tool to force it open, and with my oldest daughter's help, we pushed our way in. The door finally gave, and that's when we found her. She was lying face down under the covers, completely still. On the nightstand, there was a glass of water and a few pills scattered nearby. My stomach dropped. I rushed to her side and checked for a pulse. Her skin was cold, already starting to change color. My younger daughter broke down crying. She ran over, shaking her mom's body, begging her to wake up. My oldest was on the phone with 911, her voice cracking, panic rising. But it didn't take a doctor to see she'd been gone for nearly a full day. I was numb, paralyzed. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me just wanted to curl up and vanish. I didn't know if I should cry or rage, but the guilt? It hit me hard. I kept thinking, was this my fault? Did I push her too far? The paramedics showed up, and everything became a blur. One of them gently told me they were preparing to move her body into a bag. Somehow, word had reached my son, and he showed up at the house not long after. He walked through the front door and collapsed into tears the second he saw the scene. He was inconsolable. I don't even remember who I spoke to or in what order, but I sat with the investigators for hours that night. It was like being stuck in someone else's nightmare. And no matter how long it lasted, it was only just beginning.